If you're looking to create, grow, and sustain your wealth, download and subscribe to the Pain Points of Wealth podcast at BeBullish.com with Bob, Ryan, and Chris Payne. It's your podcast for market insights, money tips, and real talk on the economy. Download and subscribe at BeBullish.com.
This episode is brought to you by Netflix. New players, new games, new rules. Squid Game, The Challenge returns for a gripping second season. 456 contestants from all walks of life, competing in the ultimate test of strategy, alliances, and endurance. For a life-changing prize of $4.56 million. With stakes this high, why make friends when you can make millions? Catch up on the latest episodes, now playing only on Netflix.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
At 5 minutes after the hour, ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again as we journey through time and space and in other directions too with the Dr. Sky Experience. Thank you once again for joining us as we move deeper into your weekend about many of the great mysteries out in the universe. If you're a first-time listener, thank you for being with us. The Dr. Sky Experience speaks with you about subjects from astronomy, space, aviation, weather, and, of course, celebrity guests and stories of American exceptionalism. If you'd like to email me, that's easy, and we do appreciate all those that do come. The email is simply DRSKY, of course, at WABCRadio.com. To get in early on the conversation during the 2-hour radio show, as you tell us, ladies and gentlemen, with a great guest, the contact number is 1-800-848-9222. That's 1-800-848-9222. And you can listen, that is, in perpetuity to many of the other iterations of the Dr. Sky Experience, along with all the other great hosts 24/7 on Talk Radio 77, WABC. How do you do that? Simply go to WABCRadio.com or RedAppleAudioNetworks.com. Proud to be heard and sitting behind this microphone, a true privilege and honor, as again we move deeper into your weekend. Heard in some 173 countries, as you hear often, in all 50 states. And, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure beaming our signal, the powerful signal, out into the universe. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank our helmsman, and very apropos to the subject matter that we'll be talking about in hour number 1, our helmsmen, Tony and Bill, navigating this powerful signal of 77 WABC. Ladies and gentlemen, we haven't talked for a long time about the realm of weather. And an interesting story and a great author we'll be hearing from in hour number 1 with your questions and comments. Moving back in our time machine, the date, some 50 years ago, November 10th, 1975, the sinking of the famous Great Lake cargo ship, the Edmund Fitzgerald, on the Great Lake Superior. Just to give everybody an idea, if you're not a person who's lived in that portion of North America, just to give you an idea about how big in volume these 5 lakes are, west to east. Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, Lake Huron, Lake Erie, and Lake Ontario hold more than 80% of North America's fresh water and more than 20% of the world's. In a different perspective, if you could empty the Great Lakes over North and South America, you would flood the land in a foot of standing water. We'll be correlating the weather story with the sinking of the famous ship, the SS Edmund Fitzgerald, as 2 strong weather systems, a cold front and a warm front, collided over Lake Superior. That was 50 years ago. With hellacious 25-foot and higher, taller waves, the ship buckled and sank with 29 souls aboard into 530 feet of frigid water. But what really happened back then, ladies and gentlemen, and the last words from Captain McSorley were, and I quote, "We are holding our own," end quote. Joining us for the entire hour, we're privileged and honored to have him, is John Bacon. He's a New York Times best-selling author. John Bacon has worked more than 3 decades as a writer, public speaker, college instructor, radio and TV commentator, and high school hockey coach, winning awards all 5 times. He comes to us, ladies and gentlemen. He's authored some 14 books on sports, business, health, and history, 8 of which are national bestsellers. It's a privilege and honor to welcome John Bacon to the Dr. Sky Experience. Thank you for being up this early morning with us, sir. How are you?
Dr. Sky, a pleasure to be on your legendary show on WABC, and doing just fine. Thank you very much.
Wow. You know, I couldn't put this book down. And ladies and gentlemen, it's not every day that I say that, and I really mean this sincerely. I know very little, John, about the ways of navigating on lakes and oceans. You know, I do a cruise every month here, not to be on a soapbox, called the Dolly Steamboat, in which we take about 100 people out on the Great Lake here in Arizona, called Canyon Lake, to do a night sky and a beautiful dinner. but I can only imagine what it would be like to be on this then 729-foot long cargo ship, one of the largest in the world. Tell us your motivation for writing this. I mean, this is fascinating. There seemed to be a lot of lack of information, as you would agree, on the causes that we'll talk about of what happened to this incredible ship.
Well, no question about it. I'm born and raised in Michigan and grew up on the Great Lakes, and I've swam in all 5 of them at some point or other and written stories about the state and this region for many years. But it was the people that really drew me to it more than anything else, the 29 men on board. We don't know their names. We don't know who they were, what their jobs were like, what their lives were like on board and on shore, and what their families were like. So that's what I really try to get to with this book. Of course, we do dive into, as you know, the possible causes and strengthen some theories and weaken others. But the people were the great motivation. And on that, I got lucky, Dr. Sky. I got to 14 of the 29 families, to 6 crewmen who'd been on the ship before the ship went down. All 29 men went down with it that night. And even one crewman from the Arthur Anderson, which was chasing the Emma Fitzgerald that night, a guy named Rick Bartholi, which is about as close as we can get to an actual eyewitness for what it was like that night. So I felt good about that.
Amazing. Describe to those that have never seen some of these lakes, and I'm talking particularly about Lake Superior, as you describe in your book, and others, have testified. You can stand on one side of, let's say, Lake Superior in its widest part, and you simply can't see the other side. Just give us an idea in the mind, because radio, of course, is theater of the mind. Just how big in mileage do you think? Maybe not square miles, because people don't relate to that. Just how big is that Lake Superior? It's incredible. It's
bigger than you think. Let's just start there and work backwards. It's even bigger than I thought until I got in the middle of it. And in the middle of these lakes, Lake Huron, Lake Michigan, and Lake Superior, 3 of them, if you're in the middle of them, you can't see either side. It's not because of the fog or the mist. It's because the curvature of the earth. So how about this? These 5 lakes combined are the same space as Rhode Island, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire, the state of Maine, and the state of New York. In other words, all of New England plus the state of New York. That's how big they are. Lake Superior itself is bigger than the island of Ireland. How about that?
That is totally incredible. When you look at images from space, and obviously there's so many out there with the plethora of satellites that are out there, you see these distinctly standing out. But they're not and this is not a geography test for you, sir, but it's not the largest lake in the world, or is it? I mean, isn't there something over in like Eurasia that's even larger? Or they call these seas, like the Caspian Sea? And not to split hairs, obviously our emphasis is on Superior. So would you say it's the largest freshwater lake then? Is that a fair statement?
In surface area, Lake Superior is the largest freshwater lake in the world.
Wow.
And how about this? These 5 lakes together hold 80% of the nation's freshwater and 20% of the world's freshwater. Superior alone holds 10% of the world's freshwater. That's how big it is.
That's incredible. If you're just joining us on the Dr. Sky Experience, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for inviting us into your homes and into your lives as we're speaking always with great guests. As I say humbly, it's not so much about the host, but always about the great guests. Who are we speaking with? We're speaking with John U. Bacon, author of The Gales of November, the untold story of the Edmund Fitzgerald, New York Times bestseller from W.W. Norton and Live Right Publishers. This book, came out in October, am I correct? Just recently.
Correct, October 7th, and we've hit the New York Times bestseller list a few weeks. And this week we're number 12 on Amazon overall for all books and number 3 for nonfiction. So we're doing quite well with this.
Well, John, congratulations. And to corroborate the story that our special guest is telling us, many of the people, of course, in the New York State area and others around the nation that live along these Great Lakes, particularly, let's say, listeners in the state of New York, I should say, like there by Lake Ontario and, of course, Lake Erie, would love to hear about your stories because people with small pleasure boats or, small craft sailing boats, you have to really pay attention to some of the things that, I'm not a sailor. So describe some of the things. I mean, for people with pleasure boats, when we get into your story about the Edmund Fitzgerald, there's certain things you really have to know and not just have an ability to have a license to, steer a boat or navigate it. Talk about some of the concerns that even a small boat needs to have on some of these lakes like the one Superior.
Well, the main thing is heads up. In the summertime, of course, these lakes are pretty calm and quite beautiful and quite inviting, and that's when I've been in these lakes. What I was not aware of course, is truly the gales of November. In much the same way September is hurricane season in the south of the United States, It's because the water is still warm, but the air cools off. And the water wants to jump up, basically, and join the air the way boiling water rises on your stove, basically. So on the Great Lakes, that happens in November. That's when the lake is warm and the air is cool. It is by far the most deadly month on the Great Lakes, and even November and December, when it's colder, are not as deadly as November because of all that churning. So when it kicks up, it can be quite ugly. I was shocked to learn, Dr. Sky, that, and I, again, grew up here, that for experienced commercial sailors, guys get on these big old freighters and cargo ships and so on, the Atlantic Ocean is not as dangerous as the Great Lakes, and that stunned me. And it's for a few reasons. Yeah. One is because of salt water. Salt water takes the pointy waves on the Great Lakes that are like a mountain range and smooths them out and spreads them out. And also on the ocean, the storms tend to be 500 or 1,000 miles away. So by the time the waves get to us in the ocean, because of the salt water and the distance, they're nice, smooth roller coasters, still scary, still dangerous, certainly, but not nearly as dangerous as the waves on the Great Lakes, which are sharp, pointy, and twice as close together. So instead of 10 or 16 seconds apart, they're 4 to 8 seconds apart. And why does all this matter? It matters because you can have your bow stuck in one 30-foot wave at one end, nothing supporting, as you said, 700 feet of ship, and then the stern stuck in a 30-foot wave at the other end. So you've got basically two sawhorses holding up your ship with nothing in the middle. What's going to happen? It's going to sag in the middle. Then it's going to what's called hog, which is drape over the next wave, and then sag again, and then drape over the next wave, sag and hog, sag and hog. That can happen 10,000 times in a day. So if that happens, take a paper clip and bend it back and forth 10,000 times. What's going to happen? It's going to crack.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's what happened to the Bradley in 58 and the Morel in 1966, which I have chapters on in this book. The stunning stat, you add it all up, Steve, what you get is 6,000 commercial shipwrecks between 1875 and 1975. That is one a week, every week for a century. 30,000 men lost. That's one a day, every day for a century. It's just a stunning stat about how dangerous these lakes really are.
That's amazing. John Bacon is our special guest, ladies and gentlemen, an incredible book that has climbed to the top of the New York Times best-selling list, entitled The Gales of November, simply subtitled The Untold Story of the Edmund Fitzgerald. He's with us for the entire hour, and yes, ladies and gentlemen, you're invited to the conversation. No seasickness involved in this conversation at all, and no pun intended. 1-800-848-9222, 1-800-848-9222. John, I'm fascinated by this. We talk weather here in the Dr. Sky Experience, but not often enough. So describe to us, as you describe in great detail in the book, what and where these weather systems came from, and the merge point was obviously over this Great Lake.
Well, you're right about that. This ship leaves on Sunday, November 9th, 1975, from a port, Superior, Wisconsin, which is right next to Duluth, Minnesota. This is at the western point of Lake Superior, what's called the head of the lakes. And on that day, it was 70 degrees and not a cloud in the sky at that time, and beautiful calm waters, and you think that's great news. It's not great news, because on the Great Lakes, the longer winter takes to arrive, the nastier it shows up. It's like water behind a dam. When the dam finally breaks, it's going to get ugly. In this case, it was two storms, as you point out, that converge. One is the Alberta Clipper, bringing cold, dry air from western Canada and heavy winds. The other one starts in the southwest of the United States, and it kind of swirls around and goes up. It's called the Panhandle Hooker. How about that name?
Wow.
So that brings hot, wet air and heavy winds. These two forces, cold and warm, converge right in front of a place called Whitefish Bay. Whitefish Bay is kind of like the drain, if you will, of the bathtub that is Lake Superior. This is where it drains down into Lake Huron and the four other lakes. And that's safety for these sailors. So they're trying to get to Whitefish Bay, 350 miles away from Duluth, Minnesota. And these two storms converge right in front of Whitefish Bay like a catcher guarding home plate, and that is what the ship is going to run into.
That's incredible. And, ladies and gentlemen, at the bottom of the hour, in the 45-minute mark, you'll be hearing, as you've probably heard thousands of times, ladies and gentlemen, the rendition, of course, by Gordon Lightfoot, sad to hear of his passing so sudden as a great performer in not only this particular memorial to the Edmund Fitzgerald, but ladies and gentlemen, again, your calls here are welcome at 1-800-848-9222. The phone lines are lighting up right now. And in respect to our callers, John, let's say good morning to Frank in the great state of Maine. Good morning, Frank. I haven't talked to you in a while. You're on with John Bacon. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing well, Dr. Sky, and Mr. Bacon. I really appreciate your insight into the Edmund Fitzgerald. And my question is about not only Edmund Fitzgerald, but other events that happen in what is called the Michigan Triangle. The Northwest Flight 2501, I believe, that disappeared in 1950. A couple of light aircraft that have disappeared over that triangle. Do you equate the West, those missing also aircraft, like what happened to the Edmund Fitzgerald, or you think it's something more, I would say, sister, but something more like sporadic, like the Bermuda Triangle?
Interesting observation, John. You'll be the expert on this, and that's an interesting question from Frank.
Sure. The Michigan Triangle, which Frank is talking about, claimed a few major planes. Is between Manitowoc, Wisconsin, if I understand it correctly, Ludington, Michigan, and Benton Harbor, Michigan. So a triangle covering a good chunk of Lake Michigan. This ship did not go on Lake Michigan, so I'm pretty sure that's not a factor here. Nonetheless, trust me when I tell you, Frank, I have read about every possible theory, including UFOs, carrying an atomic bomb, things like this. But anyway, what it really was, and I pretty much buy John Tanner's theory. John Tanner was the Great Lakes Maritime Academy superintendent for many years. He taught this stuff and had 2 of his cadets on this ship out of the 29. So when a big ship like this goes down, it is rarely just one cause. It tends to be a series of problems that accrue over time: nature, manufacturing, mechanical failure, human decisions. And when the dominoes start falling, watch out, it gets ugly fast. So in this case, you had several factors that converged at once to make this a very difficult trip, even if it had made it, and it almost did make it. It's 1 hour away from safety, but it was almost everything at once.
And Frank, you get the last word, of course, in this dialogue exchange. Please continue if you're still with us.
I thank you. I thank you, Dr. Sky. I'm glad you mentioned that. I know it didn't go on Lake Michigan. I know it was in Superior, but you know, it comprises even more of a what it was called was the Great Lakes Triangle. I'm just assuming that maybe the realm or the sphere expanded to that type, you know, that Great Lake. You know,
I think we lost you, Frank. There you are. I'm sorry.
Oh, wait. You got me? Do you have me?
Yes, you're bouncing back and forth, but please continue.
Okay, I'm sorry. Up here, it's 28 degrees and a beautiful starry night. So it's got to be the weather. But nonetheless, it's I wanted to equate that even though it didn't happen on Lake Superior, the sphere of the triangle might have expanded to that Great Lake. Okay, weather patterns. I understand weather patterns are very, very sketchy in that area. So that could be a reason. And I appreciate the answer. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Frank, as always, being part of the Dr. Sky experience from the great land of Stephen King, an amazing author, and appreciating you, Frank, from the state of Maine. John, this is interesting. Wish we had 42 hours to talk about all this, but in the time we have this morning, we're much appreciative of your time, which is interesting nonetheless. So this is what I wanted to try to start the conversation on, if you don't mind. Talk with us about something. The purpose of all this shipping is the collection and transportation of something called taconite. Now, many people out there may think that's something like kryptonite that Superman has to run from, but hardly, not being funny. Talk about this. It's a very precious, at the time, and maybe still is, I don't know, a commodity on the Great Lakes for the production of steel. Talk about it.
Sure. Iron ore, of course, very popular. The Great Lakes transport a lot of things. Of course, grain is the most fertile region in the world, produces more grain for the world than any area, and Germany is number 2. Of course, lumber, copper, 3 times more money was made from the copper rush than made from the gold rush. How about that?
Wow, that's amazing.
I know, and people don't know about that, of course, but limestone turns iron into steel, so that's what U.S. Steel uses in Gary, Indiana, and of course iron ore. Now, before World War II, they used up pretty much all the easy iron ore that you could get out of the mines of northern Minnesota, northern Wisconsin, and Michigan's Upper Peninsula. So this area called the Iron Range, no surprise, and Bob Dylan, for example, was born and raised there. This area produces most of the nation's iron, but all the easy stuff got used up before World War II. So they thought they'd be in trouble after World War II, but a guy named Professor Wilson at Minnesota, he found a new way to take what used to be a useless byproduct, taconite, and convert that into pebbles, which are marble-sized balls, basically, that they can pour onto these ships, in much the same way that fracking reinvigorated oil drilling here in the United States. The easy oil had been found and used, and now fracking has made us an oil power again. So that's kind of what it did. And it was so important during World War II because this is stuff that when it gets through the Soo Locks, that's the bottleneck between Lake Superior and Lake Huron, that's the stuff that goes to Detroit to build the B-24 bombers, the Liberators, which they produce one per hour every hour for 3 years. That's Rosie the Riveter and that crowd, naturally. That's how you beat the Axis powers, is through the arsenal of democracy.
That's amazing, John. No, that's an amazing statement out there to all the women that gave so much to the war effort. I mean, this is amazing. I didn't realize that product, the taconite, obviously they turned it into metal, but what was the numbers that you said that they produced per hour? Am I hearing this correctly?
Oh, they made one B-24 Liberator bomber per hour. And that's a plane with 1.5 million parts. So they were running 3 shifts, 24 hours a day for 3 years. And that's how you did it. And this was so important to the war effort, the true arsenal of democracy, and you know that phrase, that President Roosevelt, FDR that is, stationed 7,000 soldiers at the Soo Locks, this very remote area where these ships pass through, during World War II, making it the most protected area in all of North America. Because if that failed, if the Germans managed to bomb that, if that failed, then we're not going to get the iron to these plants, and in that case, we'd lose the war. So no tanks, etc., no shells and whatnot. So this was vital to the war effort. And then after the war, 1945 to 1975, all that iron was used, of course, to make cars for the Big Three. This area was Silicon Valley before Silicon Valley. It was the most powerful economic force in the world for those 3 decades. Not anymore, of course, although it's still pretty powerful. So in 1958, the year the Edmund Fitzgerald was launched, 37 of the 100 biggest companies in the United States all revolved around Detroit. Car makers, of course, tire makers, windshield makers, oil makers, steel makers, and so on. It all revolved around Detroit. And here's a fun fact for you you're not going to believe. What Great Lakes town, city, in 1960 was bigger than Miami, Tampa, Jacksonville, Nashville, Tennessee, and San Jose, California? And the wild answer is Toledo, Ohio. How about that?
How interesting is that? Wow, and that's all the way at the far end of the journey that these ships were taking. I guess that's
exactly
the
right.
Point. That's
By the way,
amazing.
I hope your listeners appreciate this man does his homework. You've been on point both off the air and on the air. You know your stuff. You've done your homework. It's a pleasure talking to you.
No, it's a pleasure to have you, and equally important to the listeners out there, and as we call Theater of the Mind here on the Dr. Sky Experience, we encourage that. Let's say we have listeners out there, John, that are ex-Navy, men and women, those that have been merchant marines, or anybody who's been even on cruise ships, because as you're going to describe to us as we go to the break in just a moment or so, the hard break in radio and television, the interesting thing about this is, I don't know, I was on a cruise ship, small thing, like a ferry from Portland, Maine to Halifax, Nova Scotia once, a long time ago. The nose opened up and it put cars and trucks in there. And foolish me, I started to eat the buffet before we left the harbor. And that was the biggest mistake of my life without going into the human details.
Yeah.
It was nothing but hell on earth. Oh, excuse me, I'll rephrase it. It was nothing but hell on the water. For the entire cruise, the only way it was relieved was to lie down, and the minute you got up, it started all over. But ladies and gentlemen, more with our special guest, John Bacon, author of a great book, climbed to the top of the New York Times best-selling list, The Gales of November, the untold story of the Edmund Fitzgerald, ladies and gentlemen, here with you at 1-800-848-9222. John will be right back, and ladies and gentlemen, we'll resume after just a few moments.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Waves are not measured in feet or inches. They are measured in increments of fear. 34 minutes after the hour, as we go back in our time machine to that date, November 10, 1975. Where were you, ladies and gentlemen, when a 75 million pound ship, the largest in class, some 729 feet long, braved the Witch of November? Here to talk about it is our special guest, John Bacon, author of Gales of November, the untold story of the Edmund Fitzgerald. John, thank you. Talk a little bit about the construction of this ship and the people who actually ran that ship in the memorial that we're doing.
Sure. The ship was commissioned by, sure enough, Edmund Fitzgerald. He was the CEO of Northwestern Mutual Life Insurance in Milwaukee, and you can ask, why is that guy involved in shipping? Well, his grandfather and his 5 great uncles were all Great Lakes captains, so 6 guys in one family, and there were only 300 on the Great Lakes at the time. So that's 2% of the total. That has to be a record. So he asked for 2 things. One, that the ship not be named for him, and of course it was. They voted behind his back. And 2, that it be simply the greatest ship that the Great Lakes had ever seen, and it truly was that from day one. It was 729 feet long, as you said earlier, the longest in the Great Lakes. It carried the most cargo. It was one of the fastest. It set every record in the Great Lakes for fastest load, biggest cargo per season. That's for 9 months. So it was a heavyweight champion. It was a sprinter. It was a workhorse, all in one. And amazingly, it was also the most luxurious ship on the Great Lakes, which seems oxymoronic. But they outfitted the living quarters from J.L. Hudson's, the biggest department store at the time in the world, in Detroit, with plush carpeting, wood-paneled walls, tiled bathrooms, air conditioning, and TV. In an era in 1958, they didn't normally have these in hotels.
Yeah, that's amazing, John. I mean, when you think about it, and again, after reading your book, I've got a total different view of this ship. And I thought it was just some rusty old boat, out there in the ocean, sad that it sank. God bless them for the loss of lives. But you described this. They had world-class cuisine on there, staterooms. I mean, everything on there was top of the line. And this is so amazing. And if you were lucky, how did they dole out those passengers that got that treatment? I mean, was it kind of like a lottery, or it was kind of like, hey, if we like you, we'll let you go on here? But in a business sense, I guess there was a connection, of course.
It was more like B, no lottery. These were high-powered guys, friends of Edmund Fitzgerald, Northwestern Mutual, hotshots, but oftentimes clients like National Steel, Ford Motor Company, U.S. Steel, and so on. People like that would get on the ship. These are the people who order your ship to haul cargo. So that ship was never lonely, and you hit the nail on the head on a few fronts. Great food. Why do you spend your money like this? And the answer is they wanted to attract the best captain of the Great Lakes and the best crew, and they got both. And as you said, the VIPs. So it actually was a very shrewd investment. But from the mechanical side of things, it was a great ship, but it was built in 3 sections, prefabricated sections, and then basically glued together, if you will, fastened together in Detroit. So right there it's more flexible than usual, and they swapped out thousands upon thousands of rivets for welds. Now, welds are faster to do. They're cheaper to do. They're also lighter. So you saved 1.2 million pounds by welding instead of riveting. And that, of course, means you can carry 1.2 million more pounds of iron ore on every trip.
Well, that's a lot of welding for 729 feet. But let's do this if we can, John. It's so amazing. The response to this is very much overwhelming, as we would expect. Let's say good morning to Max in Manhattan. Max, good morning. How you doing? You're on with John Bacon. Appreciate you. Well, Max, call us back. Apparently, he's moved out into the infinite. So, John, let's talk a little bit more about this. The ship itself, you're talking about welds, not rivets. I mean, is that something controversial that people would say, well, maybe because it's riveted, that's one of the reasons when it's in 25-foot seas that maybe she snapped in half? Is that a fair assessment, or certainly not true at all? Do we really know?
Well, it's impossible to say exactly what threshold was the snapping point, if you will. Mm-hmm. But certainly by welding versus riveting, it became far more flexible. Now, all the folks out in New York know that skyscrapers are meant to be flexible to make sure they can bend a little bit in the wind, and these ships have to bend a bit too. But this ship was by far more flexible than any other ship on the Great Lakes, which, as I said earlier, when it bends back and forth, you can pay a price for that. So the ship was great, but it did have some flaws baked into it at construction.
Not to take away from your energy that you're giving us, and it's super positive, I love it, on the great Edmund Fitzgerald, the 729-foot-long ship. Talk briefly, if you would, about another tragic series of weather events that happened, back at the turn of the last century, 1913, through that same region?
You got it. 1913 is called the White Hurricane, and that was considered the storm of the century at the time. Now, this storm in 75 would surpass it. But it kicks up from Western Canada as well as from southwestern United States. It's the same formula. Cold air from the north and warm air from the south and heavy winds. And that blew from November 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th, so 4 days covering the same days of the Edmund Fitzgerald. And that claimed 19 ships and 254 lives, which is just a stunning stat right there as well. So this is not new in the Great Lakes.
Yes, we put out many mysteries here to our audience on the Dr. Sky Experience with you, ladies and gentlemen. 1-800-848-9222. If you're just joining us, John Bacon, author of the New York Times best-selling book, and rightfully so, well documented, ladies and gentlemen, off the charts, The Gales of November, the untold story of the Edmund Fitzgerald. In the short time we do have, I know people are probably curious out there. So the ship goes out, makes many, many back and forth passages, no reaction. Again, everything seemed to be ship-shape, as they say. The amazing crew, the amazing people that made it happen, and the loss of these 29 individuals, obviously including the captain, McSorley. Describe to us some of the theories, briefly, as what might have caused this ship to go down. Obviously, the weather is the big contender.
Well, that's a good point, and actually, Dr. Sky, people skip over that one. Without the storm of the century, everybody would have been fine, so there's that. Mm-hmm. There's the construction of the ship we talked about. That was a contributing factor. Some say that the hatches were not properly fastened by the crew. That'd be the deckhands. They've got to fasten 80 Kessner clamps per cargo hold, and there are 21 cargo holds on this ship. 21 hatches. But those are found to be fastened correctly, so I don't put a lot of stock in that theory. Another one is, did they possibly bottom out over an area in the northeast corner of Lake Superior called 6 Fathom Shoal? Now, a fathom is 6 feet, so 6 fathoms is 36 feet, which is shallow enough to avoid naturally in a lake that is otherwise 1,000 feet deep. But it's also in some places far shallower, 11 feet deep. So you want to be nowhere near this, but at that point of the night, the Edmund Fitzgerald had lost its long radar, its short radar. The lighthouse at Whitefish Point had been knocked out, and even the beacon from that same lighthouse at Whitefish Point that directs energy to the ships to let them know where they are, that was also out. So this Captain McSorley, is sailing largely blind. So he might have bottomed out on 6 Fathom Shoal. If he did, that would explain why water is coming on later on and giving the ship a starboard list. That is a lean to the right in this case. And that means you can't steer very well. It means you're more vulnerable to a big wave coming down and crashing onto you. And it means you're halfway towards capsizing already. So that's another theory. And then, of course, the question is, did it break up on the surface as other ships had, as I said earlier, or did it break up after the bow hit the bottom of Lake Superior, 530 feet down, and break up there? We do know the ship now is in 2 sections. So
I can't imagine, John, the frigid water. I mean, this is something you'd have to have more than a wetsuit, like some kind of a Michelin Man kind of thing, where your body would expand. You know, I ride a lot of motorcycles, and people say, oh, the latest thing for safety on motorcycles is expanding, like having an airbag. The thing inflates and you bounce. But let's go back to reality here. The whole concept here of moving through the oceans and lakes now with these hellacious, big waves. I mean, before we hit the break here in about a minute or two, How high were the alleged waves here that are smashing against the Edmund Fitzgeralds? And so people can understand in their mind how massive in height.
It's just insane on the way down on Monday, November 10th. Regularly they're seeing 30-foot waves, and where the Fitzgerald was, where no other ship was, they were an hour ahead of the Arthur Anderson. David Schwab, one of my experts for Michigan Tech, the University of Michigan, he said this ship ended up in exactly the wrong place at exactly the wrong time, right in front of Whitefish Bay. The waves we now know were 30, 40, 50, even a few 60-footers. And this ship only has, it only has 11 feet out of the water to begin with on a good day, and as we know, Dr. Sky, this is not a good day. 100-mile-per-hour winds. That is hurricane force. So that's what it faced there at the end.
God bless those souls. I mean, that's incredible. And I mentioned before just a short cruise I had, maybe some other people, and I've been on other ocean liners, but luckily no vertigo, but that's another story. Ladies and gentlemen, we're coming back with Lou in Floral Park. We'll get to you and the other callers that are hopefully going to join us at 1-800-848-9222. Still time to get in your questions, comments, or observations. Maybe you're a person who's retired from the Navy, or you just sail pleasure boats, and you yourself have been in rough seas. Your description to corroborate our story. Author John Bacon, The Gales of November. We'll be right back on the Dr. Sky Experience.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Big storms create big captains, and they destroy the little ones. A quote from Unknown at 46 minutes after the hour. Our special guest, ladies and gentlemen, John Bacon, author of a New York Times best-selling book. We ask you to take a look at this book if you're interested in things that go in the weather world to some of the most mighty captains and crew. The Gales of November. Let's say good morning as we welcome to the microphones here Lou in Floral Park. Good morning, Lou. How you doing? You're on with John Bacon.
Yes, good morning. Good morning. Great subject. I have a family member who certifies welds in power plants, nuclear, steam, whatever it is.
Yes.
Now, what kind of certification you think they had back then? You know, how structurally sound those welds were?
Good question. Wow, John, he brings up a good point.
Great question. I'm sure they were inspected, and great insight you're bringing to this. At the Great Lakes Engineering Works in Zug Island in Detroit, where the ship was launched. But even at that, what has to be said in defense of the welds and the engineers, that they basically designed the ship for X amount of iron, which in this case about 22,000 tons. That's about the same as about 4,000 adult elephants, believe it or not. That's how crazy these numbers are. But in 1969, 71, and 73, the Coast Guard and the American Bureau of Shipping changed regulations. So it allowed the ship, without any modifications whatsoever, to go from having 14 feet above water as the regulation for the what's called the Plimsoll line, down to 11 feet. All right, they gained 3 feet down into the water to load up 4,000 tons more of iron taconite. And again, it was not designed for that. So you're asking the ship to do things it was not designed for. That's not the welder's fault. That's, the regulations, basically.
No, sir, I'm not saying it is. And just listening to you just now, it seems like it was not engineered to, carry the load. It's a 3 foot from 14 to 11, just to increase the load. That sounds criminal to me. I don't know.
Well, Lou, I don't think, John, as he's explained here, I mean, this is something interesting. Back then, we may not have had the requirements in the details. Who knows where those documents maybe are or what they did. But, Lou, this is interesting. A good friend of mine who was in the submarine force, he was always talking about the USS Thresher, a nuclear-powered submarine that off the coast of New Hampshire actually just imploded. And wrongly, people were saying that it was the poor welds that were on the submarine. And I know, John, this is a little off subject, but maybe not to what Lou was talking about. So they were saying that it's not necessarily the fault of those welders. Imagine what you have to do for submarines with crush depths. So the point of the matter is, they say something else happened, maybe some inlets or some of the things that John can relate to, like on the Edmund Fitzgerald. Maybe some of these hatches just filled with water. And when the submarine, in this case, or a ship can't stay above, afloat, we got 75 million pounds, right, John, of weight in hellacious storms. So, Lou, thanks for being with us. Appreciate your time, my friend. Always to everybody with the Dr. Sky experience. So, the last theories. I mean, of all the things that you've examined, John, your best, I hate the word guess. That's not a good word. Your research gives us, what's the best candidate for what you think really happened to the Edmund Fitzgerald?
Well, I'm with John Tanner, the former superintendent of the Great Lakes Maritime Academy. It was everything at once, pretty much. It was this once-in-a-lifetime storm. It was some of the design flaws of the ship, and again, the increased weight. It was mechanical failure that night of the long and short radar. It was the decision to take the northern route, which is why it ended up going probably over a 6-fathom shoal. That was a cautious, judicious decision for the captain to make, but it might have backfired because he did not know that route as well. And honestly, just some dumb luck being at the wrong place at the wrong time, as the one expert said. But ultimately, Steve, I go to Aunt Ruth is her name for almost everybody. She's the mother of Bruce Hudson, a 22-year-old deckhand on the ship, who had just left Ohio State to spend 2 summers on the ship and make very good money, 3 or 4 times what a teacher made at the time. She said that ultimately only 30 know, 29 men and God, and no one's talking.
That's
and
amazing.
We're all, your term guess is not unfair. Without eyewitnesses, we can only get so close to the answer.
Let's continue with the callers. Let's go to the convergence of Lake Erie and Lake Ontario as we go to Buffalo, New York, and say good morning to David. David, haven't talked to you in a while. How you doing this morning?
This is David Maziarz. I've never called.
You haven't? Well, another David. There you go. Thanks,
that's
David.
Dave from Lockport. He's my friend, by the way. But anyways, I drove alongside the Edmund Fitzgerald at the Tonawanda Iron Works on a Minimax hydroplane, and it was beautiful. My friend, Steve Allison, and his father got a tour of it because the captain was drinking at a bar called Beachy's in North Tonawanda.
Amazing.
And it was an amazing ship, and the Tonawanda Iron Works would make pig iron, and they had a crane going out over into the little river, and it would, go down and pick up the stuff and drop it off, and they'd light up the sky at night when they dumped the slag from it. But it was a beautiful ship. So Steve died in 1975. I was on a motorcycle with him, and he died. A truck pulled out in front of us, and I just figure I have to tell this story because.
Well, David, no, this is powerful. I mean, God bless your friend, and God bless the crew here that we're memorializing from John's book. But that's amazing. I've used to go up in the area during my time living in the New York area, spent a lot of time in the Buffalo area. And I remember seeing these massive ships all over the lake, massive in size. That's amazing, right, John? I mean, here's a gentleman, here's Lou, David talking about his actual experience seeing that ship. That must have been amazing.
Oh, yeah, these things are, again, the scale of it is amazing. And what's incredible is shipping is incredibly important to our economy, and I did not appreciate until I started doing this book how much so. It is the cement in your basement, the car in your driveway, and the food on your table all comes from these ships. And yet it's kind of an invisible industry unless you live in Buffalo, for example. Sure. Most of us don't know much about it. And I was wondering why that is. And the reason, I think, is because there are only 30 crew on one of these gigantic ships, 700 feet, now 1,000 feet. That's not very many. And there are only back in the heyday, about 300 ships. That's only 9,000 people spread out over 8 Great Lakes states, as well as Ontario province, of course. So you're not going to meet them, chances are. And even if they live next door to you, Dr. Sky, you're still not going to meet them because these guys are on our ship 9 months out of the year with no vacations, no weddings, no graduations, none of that. These guys are gone 9 months out of the year. And as one of my sailors told me, I'm very close to my 3 kids, but I didn't teach any of them how to throw a baseball or how to ride a bike. It's a very hard life in many ways.
I imagine. It's tough. I mean, for the wives and for the children. Again, when we salute veterans, I mean, this is it's really on the same subject. We always say thank you for the service, but we want to also mention for the women that did not go to war, that raised the families, that stress is probably just the same as somebody being in combat. But the point is,
great
these
point,
sailors,
by the way, the moms are the heroes here, no question.
Absolutely, my friend. I did some research on this and see if I'm even correct. I mean, maybe there's even one larger. The Big Paulie supposedly now is the largest of the Great Lake ships, 1,013 feet long. And looking at the pictures of this, John, I say to myself, my goodness, that thing Looks so big. But it's lake lock, they're telling us. I mean, it can't go anywhere else but stay on the lake, I guess, right? Or is that not true? It can't fit through the locks.
The 1,000-footers can't go on the St. Lawrence. The 700-footers, like the M.F. Fitzgerald, could have gone through the St. Lawrence Seaway and out to the ocean, but the 1,000-footers can't.
It's amazing. John Bacon, tell us, how can people get in touch with you? Obviously, the book is available where all good books are available, and that's in many, many places. Talk to us about how people, if they'd like to get in touch with you and maybe follow up, how do they do it?
Sure. JohnUBacon.com is the website. You can find out where to order the book there. We're number 12 this week on Amazon, so we're doing very well there, and New York Times bestseller. So Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and if you click that link, you can also find out the local bookstore that is carrying copies. They have been wonderful, and I appreciate that. And also, the book tour is going to be on there as well. I'll be hitting the West Coast in 2026, as well as Florida.
Wow. Well, I hope. I'm here in Phoenix, proudly as it is right now, a native New Yorker in my blood, born in Jamaica, Queens, and lived in a little area along the beach called Rockaway Beach, and I'll never forget it. But more important than anything is your story that you're telling us here this morning, the early morning as we move deeper into the month of November 2025, memorializing those, the 29 that lost their lives on one of the great ships, one of the great sailing ships, 729 feet long, weighing an estimated, what, John, 75 million pounds with all of its weight, sadly moving in the convergence of two very, very powerful storms. I never knew that those lakes could have, again, just for the audience to hear it again, the alleged height at max of some of those waves was what? Tell us again.
60 feet, and we've got computer models now that we didn't have then to basically make this point from the professors. So it is just a stunning stat.
You get the floor for the last couple of minutes as we give all of our guests and special authors and guests. What's the message that you'd like to get if you had maybe a minute or two to say about what you've done in the research to tell the people around the world?
Sure. Well, thank you. As we said earlier, the Great Lakes are bigger than you think. They're more dangerous than I ever thought, more so than the Atlantic Ocean. Shipping is vitally important to what we do naturally, and the M.F. Fitzgerald was the greatest ship of his time. But I told you before that 6,000 shipwrecks occurred between 1875 and 1975. Since November 10th, 1975, when this ship went down, the answer is not one Great Lakes shipwreck has occurred since then, zero. And the reason is the M.F. Fitzgerald and the song, of course, which got a lot of attention to it. They reformed forecasting, communications, and just basic common sense. When in doubt, stay in port. So the families know this fact, and they're grateful for the fact that no one has had to suffer like them. And I interviewed them for the book, of course. Yeah,
no, you're a multifaceted man, and I wanted to hear from you. Talk about some of your other books, because you're also very heavily involved personally in the world of sports. From what, high school and college? Tell us briefly about that.
One of my previous books is called Let Them Lead, Unexpected Lessons in Leadership from America's Worst High School Hockey Teams. I coached that team at Ann Arbor Huron, the home of the River Rats is our actual name, and I give speeches about that around the world. So that's been fun to do as well. Before that, the Great Halifax Explosion. You've been to Halifax. This ship blew up in World War II accidentally and set up a 2-mile-high mushroom cloud, wiped out half the city, 2,000 dead right away, 9,000 wounded, but Boston sent trains and ships and doctors and nurses and saved almost all the 9,000, and that made us allies in 1917.
Wow, that's amazing. And, John, one of my memorable experiences in the hockey world was visiting, and I hope I pronounce the city, and if anybody's listening and I do it wrong, I apologize, Cloquet, Minnesota. Is it Cloquet or Cloquet, where they had the international, big hockey hall of fame, I guess. What an amazing story for people who take hockey very, very seriously, right, in that part of the United States and in Canada. Amazing story. I want to thank you, John, for being part of the show, and do appreciate it. We'll look forward to having you back on many of the other subjects out there. And all I can say to you is Godspeed in the things that you do, and thank the ladies and gentlemen who are listening to the Dr. Sky Experience as we move deeper and deeper into your weekend, as we continue to talk about these great subjects, ladies and gentlemen, opening up our mind about many of the great mysteries of the universe as we talk astronomy, space, aviation, in this case, a correlation with weather of something that happened tragically back on November 10, 1975, 50 years ago. Thank you so much. John U. Bacon, you're awesome, and I appreciate your time. You have a good weekend. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Look forward to doing it again. Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. Much more to come. Additional exciting guests on the Dr. Sky Experience. We'll be right back.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
At 6 minutes after the hour, ladies and gentlemen, welcome proudly to hour number 2 of the Dr. Sky Experience here on your favorite radio station, Talk Radio 77, WABC. If you'd like to email me, I appreciate that, and we do answer all the emails and appreciate those ahead of time. The email is just DRSKY, of course, Dr. Sky at WABCradio.com. We talk with you, not at you, ladies and gentlemen, about the great subjects of astronomy, space, aviation, weather, celebrity guests, and stories of American exceptionalism. And we love dialogue of the 4 types of conversations, and we prefer it. We don't always get it, but we prefer it in the form of critical thinking. To get in touch with us and the great guests that we have, as you tell us, the contact number is always 1-800-848-9222. That's 1-800-848-9222. Listen to all the previous podcasts of the Dr. Sky Experience, and even equally important, how about all the other great hosts 24/7 here on this station, WABCRadio.com and RedAppleAudioNetworks.com. Thanks again to our helmsman, Bill and Tony, navigating this powerful signal, as you hear often, and proud to repeat it, around the nation, around the world, and I'm sure even out to the cosmos. And a bit from the trivia file, the Earth continues to lean on its axis 23 degrees, 26 minutes, and 21 seconds of arc. And the good news is that's not about to change anytime soon. And that's good news. In this particular hour, hour number 2, we bring back a very special guest to this radio show. His name is Rod Pyle. He's an American author, journalist, public speaker, and former television producer and educator with concentrations, that is, in the world of spaceflight. Pyle is editor-in-chief of Ad Astra magazine, a print and digital quarterly published by the National Space Society, and he's the author of so many books it would take hours to explain all the titles, and we'll let him do that as we say good morning to Rod Pyle. Good morning, Rod. How you doing?
Good. How are you, Steve?
I'm doing good. Hey, I know you were out there doing some business, and you just returned, a few days ago? Do you mind sharing some of the things? It's obviously related to the space story, and tell us more about what you were doing there, if you don't mind.
Well, no, thanks. I don't mind at all. I love to brag a little. So I was in Florida for the National Space Society's Space Settlement Summit, and the NSS is the group I published the magazine for. So that's an invitation-only gathering, usually about 70 to 90 people, various NASA folks, Space Force, theorists, academicians, things like that. So that went for the first 2 days at the University of Central Florida. Then the next 2 days, I was speaking at the Economist Space Economy Summit. So that's Economist magazine. They do that twice a year, which is a really fun event. And they get a really great slate of speakers there. So I had the privilege of moderating a panel. And then the last day was University of Central Florida's Space Day, which they do every year. And the 3 of them just came together really well because it was the same campus. Everything was integrated properly. The speakers were great. The staging was great. And it was just a real pleasure. And as you know, because you go to a lot of them too, conferences aren't always that much fun.
Yes, you're right. Some of them can drag on, but not necessarily because of speakers. But the point is, it takes a lot out of you traveling. And we all know, hopefully, well, obviously you made it back. With the government shutdown, flying and getting anywhere is a hassle. So would you simply say, obviously, a smaller number of people attended this conference that were expected because of the government shutdown or not?
We didn't really realize a week before that it was coming. But when I did get back to the airport, I stayed a couple extra days because I wanted to have some meetings and talk to some folks. So I finally got to the airport on Sunday and got the departures board, and it was red, yellow, red. And so I thought, well, I'll go sit in the Delta Sky Lounge. Nope, waiting list of 70 people. So, it was like that. But I mean, these are true first world problems, right? It was inconvenient. Yeah, right. I was delayed a few hours, but it's, not like it is some other places. So thank God it works as well as it does. I did make a point of thanking every TSA person I saw for showing up.
Hey, there you go, my friend. That's exactly what I was telling people on the other programs in the past. Thank those TSA individuals working without pay. And obviously, if you had a chance to even meet an air traffic controller, again, we thank them for their service and dedication, and hopefully things will get back to normal. But Rod, I wanted you to tell the audience, what's your latest book and how many, because I don't want to give the wrong number. You're an author on many, in many subjects in the space arena, but what's your latest book, and tell us the title.
So I'm working on a new one, but my latest book that is out, I did four that were released in 2019. One was called Interstellar Robots, all about the robotic space program. That was a lot of fun to do. Another was called The Heroes of the Space Age. It was kind of a biographical history of about 9 people that were seminal to the opening of space back in the 50s and 60s. Another one was called First to the Moon, which was Apollo 11 book, which of the 4 was the only one that generated like eye-popping royalties. And the last one was called Space 2.0, which is all about the new space age. And I didn't do them in the same year. They just came out in the same year. They were in the works for a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, Rob. But, we love space. That's an easy thing for people to understand. But I'm sure many of the listeners out there of Talk Radio 77 WABC all over the nation and around the world, they're also curious about these things. And we hear often, and again, not to get into a debate, with the individual callers, because we obviously have time to talk about those things in other shows. But the whole concept of us never going to the moon, all the evidence that we can give that we did, that's a whole nother story. But what I wanted to do is move on to some of the topics that are really in the news right now. And you're our go-to guy on this particular subject. Let's talk first, if you don't mind, the Chinese space station Tiangong. And the world's media reports, and you know the story, that astronauts theoretically could be stranded on the Chinese Tiangong space station. But maybe that's not really true. Tell us the evolution of that story and what's the reality of the whole story.
Thanks. So the Shenzhou 20, Shenzhou is the spacecraft that takes them up to the Tiangong, which is a modular space station I think it's about a quarter of the size of the International Space Station. So it's smaller. But they had a crew of 3 that went up in the Tiangong 20 spacecraft 6 months ago, and they were just getting ready to rotate home. So the plan normally is to have the next spacecraft, in this case, Shenzhou 21, fly up, swap out crews, and then spacecraft number 20 would come back with the crew that had been sitting up there. Unfortunately, they went to check it out. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they went to check it out, though, and found that in their viewport, there was a fracture, a crack. And I think they used the same kind of glass that we have used for years, which is fused quartz. It's very, very hard, very strong, multi-layered. So a piece of space debris apparently cracked this window. Now, could they climb in it and come home? They could try, but the last thing you want, of course, is a blowout of your port when you're coming back, because then that lets hot plasma in the spacecraft and everybody dies. So in an abundance of caution, much like we saw with the American Starliner by Boeing, which failed this crew.
Oh, yes. We haven't talked about that in a long time, but that's a story for another time. You're right. Kind of the same parallel.
It hasn't changed much. Mm-hmm. But what they decided to do is bring back the existing crew in the Shenzhou 21, the one that just arrived, and keep number 20 there to evaluate their options. So, in theory, so the crew that had been sitting there got back home. So they're home safe and sound, everything's fine. In theory, the crew of the new 3 that are up there in the Chinese station now could be at some risk if they had an emergency, because they're not sure they want to use that capsule that has the damage. But as it turns out, the Chinese, which is something we should have done all along, but it's very expensive, they keep a spare spacecraft and booster on the pad.
I see.
The whole time they've got people in space. So within about 8 days, they can turn that and set it up there robotically and let those guys have their emergency ride home. The last thing I want to mention, as you and I spoke of a little earlier, people worry a lot about space debris. Oh my God, what if something the size of a basketball hits a space station? Well, it's worse than that. So years ago, one of the shuttles lost its first couple of layers of glass on its front view panes because it was hit by a flake of paint the size of a dime.
Wow, a flake of paint
in orbit.
That's incredible, Rod. A flake of paint. Wow.
But they have so much energy moving at these speeds that if it comes in on the right vector, you're moving one direction, it's moving another, wham. So we think that's what happened to the Shenzhou, but they won't really know till they get it back, assuming it comes back in one piece.
Yeah, that's amazing. If you have questions and comments, our special guest, he's our go-to guy as we talk about space, an author. He's got many, many books, ladies and gentlemen. The man knows exactly the answers to many of the questions that you might have. And how do you get involved? You call us at 1-800-848-9222, 1-800-848-9222, talking about current news in the world of space. And obviously, many people out there have many concerns, questions, and such. And then what we promise, I always do this, Rod, in every show, is we do a sky update. And I'll save the part for the Leonid meteor shower for you because I think you'll entertain us with a very special story that I'm a little envious of, but we'll hear that story from you about your experiences a long time ago with the Leonid shower. Okay, so let's talk more about this Chinese Tiangong. We watch it. We sit here out in Arizona, people in New York, people all over the world. I recommend heavens-above.com. Now, many people may have not heard this. What is it? You go to that website, you know it, and you just see a listing. It's like a menu. It's like in gastronomy. You're cooking up some fine dish to eat, and this is astronomy in space. You plug in your city, and what do you get, Rod? You get the visible satellite. So I've been watching Tiangong for a long time, but here's my question to you. I find it quite amazing that they made that whole thing happen so fast, or am I way off the subject? It seems like it happened quicker than putting up the International Space Station. Tell us.
It did happen very quickly, but they actually have been working on their space program in China since the late 50s when we started ours. Mm-hmm. But they had a number of setbacks. They had a period of very strict Maoism. They had the Great Leap Forward period, which kind of set things back because there was a lot of turmoil, and so on and so forth. Cultural Revolution was a big one. So it really punched a hole in their program. A lot of the smart people got purged. And then finally they were able to get it going again in the 90s. So by the mid-2000s, they were able to start to fly crewed spacecraft. Now, the Shenzhou is actually just an improved version of the Russian Soyuz. So they made a deal with Russia, said, hey, can we update the existing design you have? Because Soyuz has been flying since 1965, so we know it's reliable.
It's a long time.
Primitive. Mm-hmm. It's heavy, it could be modernized a lot, but it works. So the Chinese updated that quite a bit, and they've been using that very successfully ever since then. So, it seems like a really short period of time, but as China will do, they were able to borrow foreign technology, and in this case, with the permission of the inventors of it, unlike what happens with U.S. technology sometimes, and update it. So that gave them a huge leg up.
Amazing. Totally amazing. Let's go to the callers. You're lighting up the phone lines here with a lot of plasma. Let's say good morning to Ted in Queens. Ted, good morning. You're on with Rod Pyle, the author.
Thanks so much. When I was 6 years old, I saw two B-36 bombers fly over my house. That good one, 10-engine bombers. I knew what they were. I had a model. I wanted to ask, is it known why the speed of light has a limit? Is that a reasonable question?
Well, yes, it is. And let me just jump in before Rod answers. I mean, this B-36 is another story, but hey, I love the story because they called it, one, magnesium overcast. And these airplanes that were built, I believe, by the earlier part, Convair Aviation. If anybody like you saw the thing, they had 6 propeller engines in the back, and on the other side, they had 2 jet engines. So the description from the pilots were, hey, we're flying this massive bomber, 6 turning and 4 burning. But that's amazing, Ted, to talk about it. I mean, I've talked to so many people who've flown them. Just seeing one is amazing. But let me move that over to Rod about this subject matter of the speed of light. Go ahead, if you would, Rod.
Hey, you're the physicist, man.
Okay. Well, here we go.
I know is what I read in the Michio Kaku books.
Hey, well, that was a bad pass off, right? I'm sorry to do that to you. No. So, Ted, your question is interesting. Give it to us again. Who knows what the limit is on the speed of light? Is that what you're asking? I didn't quite hear you clearly.
Yes, that's fine. How is it known that what is causing the speed of light to have a limit? That it just doesn't... Yeah. It's
amazing. I mean, I'm going to be up and honest with everybody, too. There's no answer that I really can give you other than the fact that when I tell people about the speed of light going from school, we heard this ridiculous number, Ted, that it was 186,282 miles per second. And I said to everybody in the classroom, that's ridiculous. What does that mean to understand it? So simplicity, it's 670 million miles an hour. But you got me on this one. Nobody understands what makes that limitation. Okay. And there's things that are in the cosmic quantum world, Ted, not to bore everybody with this, or hopefully they're not bored, because it is information that I think is important. Nobody really understands the next dynamic of this, and that's something which is called quantum entanglement. So in other words, something can go faster than the speed of light, even though Einstein said no, not necessarily. But where's that, accelerometer showing that that's a limit? I don't have an answer for that. But quantum entanglement says that a particle can be not only a particle but a wave, and it can transmit itself across the universe at a distance in literally like a snap of a finger. Doesn't that sound more confusing, Ted?
Yes, but I understand it can't send a signal.
Say again? I'm sorry. Go ahead. Repeat it.
It can't send a signal, entanglement.
No, it's something theoretical, but yet some of the astrophysicists and quantum people in the quantum world have said that they've identified that this can be reality. But what reality are we talking about? I mean, not to confuse everybody out there, the speed of light, I have no idea what sets the acceleration limit on it, other than they measure it. And if you were looking at it across the universe, supposedly nothing can exceed that speed. But now that's not necessarily true. Ted, I don't know if we've even answered you, but I hope we're not confusing everybody out there in Radioland. Do you have another question or comment? Go ahead, sir.
No. I appreciate very much that your patience and attention. Thank you so much. God bless you and be safe.
And there you go, Rod. I'm not a politician, so I didn't want to sound like I was bloviating there. So there you go. God bless. And not all politicians blovate, so there you go. Anyway, let's continue to talk before we go to the hard break here in about 6 or 7 minutes. But time is of the essence, ladies and gentlemen. You have other questions and comments, 1-800-848-9222. That's the important number to get in touch with us. That's interesting. You can see these objects in the nighttime sky. They're easy to see. And let's also promote it for some of the largest cities that are listening right now. The New York metro area, you can actually see easily the International Space Station, the Tiangong, and on occasion even the Hubble Space Telescope. But let's talk about something else. This gets to the political side of the story in NASA. And you're the go-to guy. What's the latest search for the confirmation of a NASA administrator? I checked the news sources and I can't get an answer that makes any sense. Tell us.
Well, so every Friday I do my podcast, This Week in Space, I co-host it with the editor-in-chief at space.com. So I count on him to give me the minute-to-minute updates, right? Because I work on a quarterly magazine. He works on a website that's updated every 5 minutes. And I said, what is going on with the Isaacman thing? And he said, we don't even know. We call, we ask. NASA, well, of course, NASA was shut down, so we weren't hearing much out of them. And then when they reopen, they're going to have reduced staff because they've been laying off people right and left and forced early retirement and so forth. But of course, what you're talking about, yes, there'll be news from NASA, but there'll also be news from people who cover the White House and so forth. So what we know is Jared Isaacman, who is a kind of a freelance astronaut, if you will. He's a billionaire due to a credit card processing company he set up when he was 16, when he dropped out of high school to get rich.
Smart guy. Yeah.
Very smart guy. Very friendly guy. I've had a chance to meet with him a couple of times, and he's, I kind of casually coined the nickname Space Jesus because he's just such a wonderful guy, especially with kids. He just, he really gets the room, and that's pretty rare for a NASA administrator. Anyway, he's flown twice with SpaceX spacecraft that he just hired out directly with his own fortune. And the second flight was the first private flight to do a spacewalk and held the altitude record that has not been broken since 1972 going to the moon. So he's a majorly accomplished guy, owns his own private training air force, blah, blah, blah. So he's nominated earlier in the year to be the administrator of NASA by the Trump administration. And so he got through the hearings. Everything was looking good. He answered the questions well. And then the next thing we know, the nomination's withdrawn with the kind of, if you'll let me say so, lame excuse, he donated money to Democrats. Well, he donated money to both parties, as wealthy people often do.
Sure.
And this has been known for months. So we think it was because Trump and Elon Musk had their falling out, and Trump said, okay, Elon, I don't want your guy either. So then we got the head of the Department of Transportation as the interim administrator for months. But this guy's trying to run two major agencies. And
oh, my God, opinion, Sean Duffy, God bless him. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't want that headache. Not only are you running the Department of Transportation with the government shutdown and emphasis on getting people to and from on aircraft and other, means of transportation. Now looking at the thing in the background in your rearview mirror, you have to run the NASA organization until something happens. But in conclusion, before we go to the break, I just wanted to say that's interesting because you're right. Isaacman is, in my opinion, a very qualified person. I mean, who better than somebody that you say has not only the bedside manner to talk to people like us, the citizens out there, children, which is obviously a big, big plus, and has the ability not to hide behind the curtain. As many, not by name, many of these executives are not available to people. And this is a person that has personality, but what, Rod, more experience than anything else, which is.
Well, he's been an astronaut and he really understands new space. So will he make mistakes? Undoubtedly. Does he have the ear of the president in a way that Duffy might? Probably not, but I think he has Congress on his side. He's definitely got a huge swell of public support, especially people in the industry. And he understands this new space age we're in that involves so much private enterprise. So I think that's the diamond right there.
Well, folks, if we haven't gotten you on the air yet, you're certainly welcome. Charlie in Brooklyn will continue after the hard break if you're still with us. And you, ladies and gentlemen, 1-800-848-9222. All these questions regarding space. Who's our guest if you're just tuning in right now in this early morning on the East Coast, and still as we move through this evening and Saturdays and Friday night, I'm trying to catch up on my own time and sleep too. But ladies and gentlemen, 1-800-848-9222. Rod Pyle, an accomplished author. He's written so many books on the space area of the next realm, space, the final frontier, as many of you have heard and many of you do believe. And if you have questions regarding all this, because we're talking now, when we come back, we'll do a little update on what you can all see in the sky. And as I promised Rod, an opportunity to share with you, ladies and gentlemen, the most amazing story of what happened to him back in 1966 when the Leonid meteor shower, which is just around the corner this weekend, was roaring once in its every 33-year iteration. And that story he'll tell us when we come back from the break. But ladies and gentlemen, always, if you have questions and comments, we do find many of the great guests here by the emails you send me. Not a guarantee, but always an opportunity to communicate. My email is just drsky, Dr. Sky, at wabcradio.com. We'll be right back.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
The universe is not obliged to conform to whatever we consider comfortable or plausible. A quote from Carl Sagan a long time ago. 32 minutes after the hour, Rod Pyle, author, journalist, television producer. He's with us, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go to the callers because they've been patiently waiting. Let's say good morning to Charlie in Brooklyn. Charlie, good morning. How are you doing?
Good morning. Your show is always interesting. Now, the phenomenon that's always intrigued me is the fact that on Earth, we don't need a spacesuit. When we go into space, is it the lack of gravity, or even more than that, the lack of atmosphere, the lack of atmospheric pressure that it makes it difficult, and why an astronaut needs a spacesuit so his body doesn't fall apart when he exits the spacecraft.
Yes. Charlie, a very apropos question for our special guest, Rod Pyle. Rod, take it away. There you go.
Well, as I wrote in that 2019 book, Space 2.0, Space Hates People, and it really does. So, and you kind of had bits of the answer in your question. So we're perfectly evolved to exist at sea level on Earth. One, gravity, as we measure it, roughly 14 pounds per square inch of atmospheric pressure, temperature extremes, ideally between like 50 and 80 degrees, and so on and so on. So we are set for that. You take us out into space, once you leave the atmosphere, because there is no more atmosphere, there's a hard vacuum. So as you see in the movies, you open the door of that spacecraft and suddenly a number of things happen. The fluids in your bodies boil, but they also freeze as they're exiting your body, and you're outgassing like crazy. So basically, they make it kind of extreme in the movies. You don't exactly explode, but your mucous membrane certainly will begin to turn inside out. You die very quickly. So spacesuits contain that pressure. They're pressurized, so they basically hold you in enough pressure, about 5 pounds per square inch in that case, because that's all you need, so that you don't suffer those physical ill effects. But there is more. The temperatures in space, the lit side of your body, if you're orbiting outside a spacecraft or standing on the surface of the moon, your lit side can be up to 250 degrees hot, and your dark shadowed side can be like 200 degrees Fahrenheit plus below zero.
That's not good.
So you've got to have some kind of cooling system in there. The Apollo astronauts had coolant running through plastic tubes that surrounded them, and that was operated by their backpack. So you've got to keep those temperatures balanced. And finally, the hardest thing is protect from radiation. There's a lot of hard radiation the second you leave the Earth's magnetosphere and atmosphere. So you have to, at some point, if you're going to be out there for a long time, the Apollo flights were short, a couple of weeks at most. But if you're going to be going, say, to Mars, or you're going to be on a moon station for months at a time, now you got to worry about radiation. So we're bags of wet meat, and we don't do well in space unless we've taken off a lot of interventions.
Charlie, you get the last word in this dialogue. Very good question from you. I hope it's been answered.
Yes, it has. And Captain Kirk and the crew of the Enterprise would have a much more complicated, if they were true to reality, it wouldn't be so effortless to to be up there.
Charlie, I consider you part of our family here, and thank you. Hope you'll continue to join us in future programs as we tried to do what, Charlie? Open up our minds on amazing things that we don't normally hear about during the day part of our lives because we're busy moving around on planet number 3. Thank you, Charlie. Let's say good morning to Paulie in Westwood. You're on with author and journalist Rod Pyle. How are you doing this morning, Paulie?
Hey, Dr. Sky. I'm sorry. I woke up late and I really missed most of your conversations. But my question from last week was, what's the difference between a planet and a star?
Very good. Well, Rod, why don't you take that one too? I mean, you're our guest, and I can chime in after. Go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because we should let the astronomer in the room address this. But a planet is smaller than a star. Generally doesn't give off heat, or not a lot of it. Terrestrial planets like Mercury, Venus, Mars, and the Earth are rocky cored planets, sometimes with molten inner cores, but they have a rocky crust, atmosphere of some kind in most cases. And then the larger gas giants are just that. They're big balls of gas. And I don't think at this point, Steve, you might know, may different, but I don't know if they've actually confirmed a hard core at the center of those or not. But that's a planet, and a star is something that's got a fusion reaction going on and is burning up hydrogen and giving off heat.
Well, you did a great job on it, Rod. Let me just say this to what Paulie's asking. I mean, just the same, in the same wording, I'll just add this. Fusion, star, planet, more likely minerals. And even though the planets have hard and maybe sometimes molten cores, the difference is usually, no pun intended, astronomical. Stars, for the most part, if you look out an entire universe, are way larger than any planet that we could ever have, and they're usually gravitationally bound to stars. So I don't know if I've added anything extra, Paulie, or maybe, hopefully not, Rod, confused everybody too, and that's never my mission. Paulie, you get the last word.
No, thank you. Thank you.
Appreciate your time. Okay, let's continue here, because I did promise that we would do this to the top of the hour. Then, obviously, callers come first. We will do our Sky Report, too, during this particular second hour. Let's say good morning to Tom in the great city of Boston. Good morning. You're on with Rod Pyle. How you doing?
Hello, Dr. Sky. I'd like to, I didn't get the show earlier, but could I get a little more information on 3I Atlas?
Yes, you can. And this is interesting, Rod. I don't want to steal any of your thunder on this either.
Oh, no. Go for it.
No. This is very interesting. Look, ladies and gentlemen, this is something very serious that I look at. I see and have interviewed all of the people that have talked about the discoveries and have made them of these interstellar comets. And some in the media, again, I'm not going to name names, they want to go on this whole story, and some of the people pick up this with incomplete information. 3I Atlas is a extra solar type of a comet. And what's a comet?
Right.
It's the remains of the creation of the solar system. This is what we're talking about, Tom. This object came from another star system. We know it. The first one was Oumuamua. A good friend of mine discovered it, Rob Wyrick. The second one was discovered by a Ukrainian astronomer called Borisov. And this one, the orbits are gigantic. They're hyperbolic shapes, meaning the biggest, widest orbits. This could be an object from another star system, as I mentioned, that's been traveling for hundreds of thousands of years, maybe more. But some in the media are talking about it being exhibiting weirdness, popping out little satellites or something. I don't agree with that. But I don't know, Tom. Have you read anything else about this that you might want to, bring to the table here? I mean, I look at it as a comet.
Well, I've heard that there's been lights on it, and the government won't release any pictures of it.
No.
But I heard it's acting like it might be extraterrestrial.
Well, let me say this. If it is, I'd be amazed, because I think now, let's go to our esteemed colleague, Rod Pyle. Rod, from everything you've read, tell me your impressions of what you think this comet is based on what the media is reporting, in your opinion. What do you think?
So the images are pretty low res. You really can't see much of what's going on. Any weird behavior, as with Oumuamua and Borisov, can be easily explained by melting pockets of ice and so forth, accelerating or decelerating the thing. But to be fair to my comrades in the media, Avi Loeb at Harvard, I'll say it, because
I respect the guy highly.
I got no stakes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, he's a great astronomer. He was the chair of the department there for years, but every time we get an interstellar object, he goes off the rails a bit. And, if he just said, as he did kind of at the beginning, tentatively with the first one, we should at least consider the possibility that this could be an interstellar probe. I could live with that. But much like Percival Lowell back in the turn of the 20th century, talking about canals on Mars, Loeb has taken his observations, magnified them dramatically, and come up with fairly illogical conclusions. We all know, as Carl Sagan said, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. I'm paraphrasing, but you get the idea. We don't have that evidence. And it got to the point where...
And let me not cut you short, Rod, but this is important because Tom is our focus of attention here. He's calling us from Boston. But here it is. I've observed hundreds of comets. Does that make me the expert in comets? No. Maybe you've observed comets, but here's the point. The evidence that it shows right now from the serious observers and massive big telescopes and space probes out there, that it exhibits different behavior than some comets, but not extraordinary differences. And then some in the media, I'm not talking about Dr. Loeb. I respect him highly. Yes, I do. If he wants to go on that, please give us more evidence. But you have some in the media that just jump on this as if it's one of these stories like the shock jock routine, where they're going to say things. I mean, look at the asteroid problem. And Tom, we're talking with you and everybody listening. We hear every week, and it bothers me tremendously. Not that I can't stand it. How many times do we hear that an asteroid 4 times the size of Taylor Swift is headed toward the Earth? I mean, come on, folks. We have a plethora of asteroids that are coming by us. Let's not sensationalize the thing. We don't want to see one hit us. And believe me, folks, the skies are being watched. Tom, have we put you to sleep at all, or have we helped in this conversation?
No, very interesting, Dr. Sky. Very interesting.
Okay. We're giving opinions, but let me say this, Tom. Yeah. If indeed it is an extraterrestrial probe, this is where the people go after this. They call them Bracewell probes. Now, everybody who's not familiar with a Bracewell probe, just look at it up, do your Google search or whatever you do. And right, Rod? Bracewell probes are these sci fiction concept of, probes that come from other star systems that may be from intelligent life. But so far, I'm going to go on the side that this is an extraordinary comet because it's a extrastellar object. It comes from another system. We need more proof. Thank you, Tom. We appreciate you, and we appreciate Rod. And guess what? It's time to go to a break. If you haven't gotten on the air, ladies and gentlemen, we will continue with Tony in New Jersey and all you out there at 1-800-848-9222. And Rod, we still want to promise them a sky report so we can hear what you had as an experience with the Leonids. We'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for your interest.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Science is not only compatible with spirituality, it's a profound source of spirituality. Another quote from Carl Sagan. 46 minutes after the hour, ladies and gentlemen, Rod Pyle, author, journalist, is with us, talking lots of things space, but let's continue on with the phone calls. Let's say good morning to Tony in New Jersey. She's been patiently waiting. Good morning, Tony. How are you doing today?
Hi, guys. Hi, Dr. Sky. Hi, Rod. I'm just so excited about what you were saying. I thought I heard you say that President Trump renominated Jared Isaacman to lead NASA. And I'm really excited about that. I think when things are meant to be, they'll be. I think we need to call senators, though, right, because he has to go through Senate confirmation. And I was also reading that former Speaker Newt Gingrich was one of the people that kind of were, in an article it said, whispering to the president about him. So I'm really excited. Are you?
Interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you know, we've had in the past, we had James Webb during the Apollo program, who was from the Bureau of the Budget, but was a fantastic administrator, primarily because he understood government and knew where all the skeletons were buried. So, you know, he was able to like LBJ, kind of push people around and get what he wanted. Since then, we've had engineers, we've had astronauts. We had Jim Bridenstine, who was a politician, turned out to be a great administrator. So we've had a kind of a wide swath of different personality types. Interestingly, and this is just my opinion, the astronauts have generally not been the best administrators. They're very good, driven people who are tremendous overachievers, but that doesn't necessarily cut a swath for you in Washington when you need to go hat in hand and beg for money to keep the agency running, and they have to do that frequently. And there's also a fair amount of brass knuckle fighting that goes on over things.
It's in politics, right? It's in the political spectrum. Tony, for the interest of time, we want to give you the courtesy of giving a response back if you so choose to do it, and I appreciate everyone who's listening and talking with us on the Dr. Sky Experience. Tony, your comment, if you have one, please continue.
Just everyone, please call the Senate, your senators, and let them know you want him. I think he'll be an excellent fundraiser for NASA.
Thank you, Tony. Always appreciate you, and we hopefully that you will be calling us in the future on many of the topics that we talk about here. We say good morning to Robert in Philadelphia. Good morning, Robert. Thanks for your patience and your question or comment this morning.
Hi, Dr. Sky and your guests. Good to talk to you guys. You should call your show the off-ramp for the week's politics, Dr. Sky, because it's so nice to ease into the weekend. You know what I mean?
Well, thank you. I mean, not to cut you short, Robert, tomorrow we're going to be doing a very special guest with American Exceptionalism, and that may change it a little bit. But again, I'm always so proud, like everybody else out there who served their country, as we talk in the post-Veteran Day world. But that's an interesting twist. Give us the name again so I can write that one down. Tell me again, Robert, what did you just say again?
I'm sorry. Were you asking me for a name?
No, I wanted the name that you told me the show should be. Tell us again, because I want to write it down.
Yeah, the off-ramp from the week's politics, or monotony, they're both the same thing.
There you go.
I'm coming from a little bit of a sci-fi perspective, I know, because I remember in the movie 2010, somehow Jupiter was converted into like a small star. And I'm not necessarily asking if that's hypothetically possible, although if it is, that would be great. But I'm wondering what the difference between a planet like Jupiter and a brown dwarf would be.
Interesting. Very interesting. Rod, you want to jump on that one, or should I take it?
Well, you should take it because, again, my knowledge is limited.
Okay, no, we're going to balance
I took in astronomy in the 1970s, which was, hey, Jupiter's a failed star, and that's about all they told us.
Well, here we go, Robert. I mean, God bless. Again, we're having a nice conversation here between all of us. Here we go, Robert. When we look at Jupiter, it would have to probably be 80 times its mass, even though it's incredibly large, 88,000 miles in diameter, to start the fusion process to create what a star would do. But here we go. The difference between the two is interesting. Jupiter would be a frustrated object to become a star if it could be 80 times its mass, but a brown dwarf on the other end of the evolution scale is more like almost lights out. And the problematic thing there is it starts to build up a lot of lithium, they call it deuterium, and then what happens eventually, the things actually turn out even to something even smaller, that it goes well deeper than the whole concept of a brown dwarf. It's the end of life, but Jupiter would be, if it could be bigger, the escalation or the beginning of life. Interesting answer, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I know that that there's a lot of pressure on Jupiter, but it doesn't really have the mass per mile that like Earth would have, of course. You know. But no, that's very interesting. And just as a closing thing before I go and wish you gentlemen a happy weekend, I hope they turn the new James Webb Telescope into the Pleiades, because I think we'll find something interesting there.
Well, absolutely there, Robert. And right next to the Pleiades, by a few degrees, is Uranus, the planet itself. Let's say good morning to John in the Bronx, try to get one more caller, and then we promise, right, Rod, the Sky Report. John, good morning. You're on the air.
Good morning. Yes, I was thinking, how big is big? Because I have a book here, and it's showing our solar system compared to M87.
Okay, a star cluster called M7. You just said M7, right?
No, M87, the black hole.
Oh, okay.
It has a diameter of 70 billion miles.
Right.
And
the problematic thing is, any black hole, John, not to cut you short, more likely in the center of our Milky Way, we have this massive black hole. Size-wise, I can only imagine. But it eats stars for breakfast like you and I would eat a breakfast no matter what our diet called for. But the problematic thing is our solar system is teeny-weeny, right, Rod, compared to the size of black holes, at least that we think. But the big one in the center of our galaxy, the Milky Way, is just off the charts. That's an amazing story, John. You get the last word.
Compare that to the Cat's Eye Nebula.
That also is a massive object, way, way larger, trillions of times. The Cat's Eye Nebula would be trillions of times. And I'm using a bad number because it's probably bigger than trillions than the entire solar system, which the extent of the solar system, if you want to look at it, Voyager's now about 15 billion miles from the sun. This big cat's eye could be many thousands of light years across. Thank you, John in the Bronx. God bless, and I appreciate you. We wanted to do this. We wanted to give a sky report. So here, quickly, I'll do this one. Ladies and gentlemen, in the New York metro area and areas in the northern United States, you have been witnessing the aurora borealis. Why? This sunspot, active region 4274, is pumping out at least 5 X-flares over the last few days. It's moving around the edge of the sun to the right. It'll go back on the backside. That's incredible. The most powerful X-flare of this entire solar cycle was back on October 3rd, 2024, when X9. That's massive. These were X2s, X5s, X4s. The higher the X number, the more power. The biggest one we had was way back around, November 4th, 2003, an X28, maybe an X45. That would be really serious, not only to see the northern lights, but damage the sky. Now we move over to Rod Pyle. Rod, this is the weekend for the Leonid meteor shower. Look on the night of the 16th into the morning of the 17th in the east. Leo the Lion rises. Some meteors are seen from this interesting shower. You were there in 1966. Testify, my brother. What did you see?
So at the tender age of 9, I quite frequently went out in our backyard in Pasadena, California, which was not nearly as light polluted as it is now, and would spend the night staring at the sky, watching meteor showers and using my little telescope to look at the moon and planets. So that night I was out there just curious to see if this kind of not terribly remarkable meteor shower is going to produce that night. And right after midnight, it was as if the sky opened up and it was raining shooting stars. I mean, it was, as you know, thousands and thousands per hour. I mean, it was like somebody just turned on this faucet. So I flipped out and ran to my parents' room and said, guys, you got to come see this. They were basically, yeah, that's nice. You're a weird kid. Go back out and sit in the backyard.
No, it's not weird, kid. You saw something, Rod, that I never heard anybody tell me this, except for one older gentleman. And I'm not putting you in an old category because I'll be 70 and I don't feel it, but hopefully you don't feel it either. But here's the deal.
Same age, brother.
That's it. We were born, I think I'm a few months older than you. but not by much. I'm January 30th of 56, and you're what, September 17th?
September, yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry to give out all your
well
personal
done.
information.
Good memory.
But anyway, here it is. That particular meteor storm, the Leonids of 66, I was a young boy in New York City, and we went into our apartment in Jackson Heights, Queens, and looked up in the sky. Now, there were a lot of lights, but not as many as today. Supposedly, Rod, in southern Arizona, people who testified on top of Kitt Peak, a big observatory, the rates of meteors from 5:30 in the morning to like 6 a.m., about a half hour, were over 500,000 meteors per hour, like you described. It's like driving through a snowstorm. So this particular meteor shower, somewhere accurate, may not produce a storm. But back in 1833, ladies and gentlemen, before he became president, Abraham Lincoln witnessed in 1833 a literal sky-shaking event when people came out praying, ran into churches, like you're describing, Rod, in a most amazing event. Imagine that. The pre-President Abraham Lincoln witnessed one of the most incredible, and he wrote about it in some of the many, ledgers and big journals that he kept. Amazing, don't you think?
I do, and I think if I remember correctly, we're going to the intensity of this is determined, as you know better than I, by the parts of the orbit you're intersecting of the comet's orbit. But I think we intersect another dense area in 2031. Is that right?
Yes, we do, and that could be amazing because if things are right, again, you have to be in the right place on the Earth, the right time, because this could happen for us on the side of, let's say, Europe or the Middle East. Well, obviously they'll get it. But for us to be in a right prime position, we'll have to do the analysis of that. And there's a gentleman that I'd like to get on the radio. His name is Dr. Peter Jenniskens, an interesting gentleman from Holland, who I think of anybody I've ever talked to who knows the science of meteors. He sent me a book, which is like 4 inches thick, of the history of meteor showers, and I was so fascinated by it. But, Rod, I'm sorry we couldn't get to all the other topics, but, of course, the callers rule here on Talk Radio 77 WABC. Tell us how people can get in touch with you and kind of peruse through the different books you have and the other things like your podcast. Tell us more.
I can be reached through my website, rodpylebooks.com or pylebooks.com. That's Pyle. And other than that, the magazine I publish is for the National Space Society, which is nss.org. So you can also reach me through there by just pressing on the media contact.
That's interesting. Always appreciate you, Rod, and your great expertise in the subject matters that you work in. Great stuff in the realms of space and what's happening in the world. And let's hope we get a administrator for NASA, and that gentleman that we talked about, Mr. Isaacson, that we hope he becomes the NASA administrator. I think he earns it from all his experience and, as we say, his bedside manner and his ability to relate to the need for people to want to learn more about the wonders of space and keep that big ball rolling. I know you would agree wholeheartedly. Thank you, Rod Pyle, for joining us.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, finishing up our sky report, too, the moon moves on to its new phase. So if you go out in the early morning hours, if you want to see something interesting, on the morning of the 19th, the thin, waning crescent moon and the beautiful planet Venus, the goddess of love and beauty, easy to see, about 15 degrees just before the sun. Most amazing sights to see in the sky, no matter where you live. Even in areas that have light pollution, there's always things you can see. And if you're interested, a simple pair of binoculars, ladies and gentlemen, will open up your world as we try to do here on the Dr. Sky Experience. Thanks to Tony and Bill being our helmsmen, navigating the powerful signal that you would expect from this great radio station. And a thanks to owner and operator John Katzimatidis, and from the executive staff, a thank you to Chad Lopez for giving me the position, the opportunity to sit behind this microphone. We'll see you in about, less than 24 hours or so, and we'll continue the Dr. Sky Experience. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Dr. Sky Experience. You can hear the Dr. Sky Experience Saturday mornings, midnight to 2 a.m. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social, on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here? It's easy to get stuck reaching for the same familiar fruits and vegetables, even when you know a colorful variety is key. Balance of Nature's fruits and veggie supplements don't replace fruits and vegetables, but it makes it easy to add more variety to what you already eat. With 31 ingredients that are whole fruits and vegetables, switching it up is easy because we've already taken care of the hard part. Go to balanceofnature.com and get a free fiber and spice supplement, plus 35% off your first set as a new preferred customer by using discount code POD.